I'm going to show you how I built this cabinet. This one's going to be used as a kitchen pantry cabinet, but it would also make a good general storage cabinet. The first step is to cut the 1x4 boards to length. The pieces of 1x4 lumber that are needed to build the cabinet are 12 6-foot-long pieces, 18 19.5-inch long pieces, 2 9-inch pieces, and 2 21-inch pieces. I measure for the placement of the pocket holes. I put them approximately every 2 feet along the long boards. To make the pocket holes, I'm going to use my Kreg pocket hole jig, but first I have to set it up. I start by setting the jig to the thickness of the wood, which is 3/4 of an inch, and then I set a stop collar on the drill bit to 3/4 of an inch using the gauge provided in the case. I tighten the stop collar in place. I align the jig with the mark I've already made on the wood. And then use the clamp to hold it on. In some places, I will be using my single-hole Kreg pocket hole jig, such as here, the pocket holes used to attach the shelves to the sides of the cabinet. Since this is 3/4 inch wood, I just align the jig with the edge of the wood, and then clamp it on with the clamp. To assemble the pieces together, I am using 1 1/4 inch long pocket hole screws. I use clamps to hold the boards in position while I assemble them. This particular piece will be a shelf. These holes on the side will be used to attach the shelf to the sides of the cabinet. The drill bit for driving the pocket hole screws is provided in the Kreg jig kit. Assembly of the long pieces that make the sides and doors of the cabinet is the same as the shelves, except I use more clamps due to the length. To fill up the pocket holes, I use pocket hole plugs and glue. Once the glue on the plugs dries, I sand them down with a belt sander. Besides the plugs, I also use the belt sander to sand the seams smooth. Now I'm ready to begin assembly of the cabinet box. This will be the bottom of the cabinet box. I use these angle clamps to hold the boards in place while I screw them together with 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. The procedure for attaching the cabinet box top is the same as with the bottom. A rubber mallet can be used to fine-tune the alignment of the pieces by tapping. To put the shelves in the cabinet, I've cut these pieces of scrap wood to act as spacers to keep the shelf spacing consistent. In this particular cabinet, the shelf spacing from here to here is 13.5 inches. I use the bar clamp to keep everything together tight while I screw the shelf into place with 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. The base of the cabinet is simply a box made of 1x4s that will be placed under the bottom of the cabinet to hold it up off the floor. It's also put together with 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. I have to drive some of the screws inside of the cabinet base box manually because there isn't enough room for the drill to fit inside of the box. The cabinet base box is mounted to the bottom of the cabinet with yet more 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. Clamps are used to hold it in position while it is being mounted. I plug up the pocket holes used for mounting the shelves inside of the cabinet with more pocket hole plugs and glue. The cabinet back is made from 1/4 inch thick plywood panels, which have to be cut to the width of the cabinet, which is 21 inches. Now I sand down the plugs on the inside of the cabinet. Because it's a tighter space, I'll be using this detail sander instead of the belt sander. The 1/4 inch thick plywood back of the cabinet is attached using 7/8 inch brass nails. I had to use 2 plywood panels to make the back of the cabinet because the 4-foot plywood panels I'm using are not big enough to cover the entire back of the cabinet. I placed the seam in the middle of a shelf here so that the seam will not be visible inside the cabinet. I'm going to paint the cabinet yellow with this yellow paint to finish it. I apply 2 coats of paint to all surfaces of the cabinet and the cabinet doors. Now for the door hinges, I measure in 3/8 of an inch because that's half of 3/4, and that centers the screws in the middle of the edge of the door. And then for the end hinges, I measure in a 1/2 inch from the top and bottom. For the middle hinge, I just center it in the center of the door. And then I line things up with the lines I've already marked. And then I mark for my pilot holes. To drill the pilot holes for the hinges, I use a 5/64 inch drill bit, being careful to make sure it won't go all the way through the wood of the cabinet box. The hinges are attached using the screws that are provided with them. Clamps are used to hold the door in place during the installation process, and then the entire process is repeated for the other door. I use a plane to make a slight adjustment to the edge of one of the doors in order to get the best possible fit. I've already measured for the installation of the handles. I'm putting them midway up the door and 3/4 of an inch in from each edge. I marked where the holes need to go, and I will drill them with a 3/16 inch drill bit. Before I install the door handles, I need to do some touch-up painting. The handle is attached to the door using the screws provided with it. The procedure is the same to attach the other handle to the other door. Next, I install the magnetic catches on a middle shelf. I place them a 1/2 inch either side of the center of the shelf. I drill the pilot holes for them using the 5/64 inch drill bit. The magnetic catches are attached using the screws provided with them. How I figure out where to put the metal plates for the magnetic catches is first I attach the metal plate to the magnet, then I close the door, then I get in here and use a pencil to trace around the bottom of the plate so I can see where it goes on the door. Then I open the door, put the plate on here, and mark my pilot holes. The metal plates are attached to the doors using the screws provided. Here is the completed cabinet. It stands 6 foot 3½ inches tall, is 21 inches wide, and is 11½ inches deep. The cost of materials involved in construction is a little over $200, and I spent about 23½ hours building it.